Happy Monday, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Brain Scratch, Case Cracked. I'm your host, John Lorden. Hope you all had a nice weekend, and thank you so much for joining me here today. I decided to start back at the top of my list of suggestions for Case Cracked. Believe it or not, this case was the second one suggested for that show. Just goes to prove to you guys, I do go through that list regularly, and every now and then I just start at the top and start working my way back down again. Today we are looking into the case of Mia Zapata, or as I like to call it, Sign of the Crab. Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, Jim Morrison, Amy Winehouse, and Kurt Cobain all have something in common with Mia Zapata. They were all musicians that died at the age of 27. Born and raised in Louisville, Kentucky, Mia Zapata is referred to by friends as a magnetic personality that was the hub of several social circles. She learned to play guitar and piano by age 9. Coming from an affluent family, they note that Mia really didn't seem to care about a high society lifestyle. Her father stated, quote, "Mia lived in two different worlds. She lived on two different sides of the street. The straight side on one, with parochial schools, an affluent family, and tennis clubs. But when she crossed the street, material things didn't mean anything to her." Mia went to college in Ohio, and in 1986, she and 3 friends formed a band. They were originally named Sniveling Little Rat-Faced Gits, a reference to a Monty Python sketch, but quickly shortened it up to just the Gits. Seattle, Washington. The grunge music scene that began in the mid-'80s was finally hitting commercial success. Bands like Nirvana, Soundgarden, Alice in Chains, Pearl Jam, and Stone Temple Pilots had redefined rock music and brought many other aspiring artists and bands to Seattle. Mia Zapata and her band, the Gits, would arrive there in 1989. They lived and rehearsed in an abandoned house they referred to as the Rat House in the Capitol Hill district of Seattle, and Mia found work at a local bar. Soon, they were getting a lot of attention. They had a female singer in a male-dominated music scene, which gave them a large feminist following. According to Rolling Stone, the Gits played everywhere along the West Coast, sharing bills with Nirvana, Sublime, Beck, and Green Day. The Gits had previously recorded several singles and an unofficial debut album, but in 1992 they would release their official debut, Frenching the Bully. In 1993, they were working on a follow-up album and started a 3-leg tour. They had just completed the first leg, another tour of the West Coast of the United States, and were home for a few days before heading out to the second leg that started in Europe. They also had a pending offer to sign with Atlantic Records. July 7th, 1993. Mia hung out at a local bar called the Comet Tavern until midnight. She then headed over to a friend's place for a few hours. She left their house around 2 a.m. She decided to walk home instead of taking a cab. Around 3:20 a.m., Mia's body was found by a prostitute on a deserted street. She was still warm. The prostitute even tried to resuscitate her, but had no success. Mia had been strangled by the cord from her own sweater hood, a sweater that proudly bore the name of her band, the Gits. She was less than a half a mile from her friend's apartment. She was found posed almost like a cross, laying close to a church. She had no ID. None of the first responders knew who she was. She was sent to the King County Coroner's Office as a Jane Doe. The medical examiner would solve that mystery. He recognized Mia immediately. He was a fan of the indie music scene and knew all about the Gits. He would also find that Mia had been savagely beaten, strangled, and sexually assaulted. It appeared that her assailant had also left behind a bite mark on her breast. The area was swabbed for DNA from the saliva of the assailant and sent in for analysis. Unfortunately, the sample was too small for the DNA testing processes in use at that time, but they did confirm it was likely his saliva, and the sample was sent to be placed in long-term freezer storage. Mia's body was sent back to her hometown of Louisville and is at Cave Hill Cemetery. So what happened to Mia in that 80 minutes between her leaving her friend's home and being found dead? Her friends insist that she would have never gotten into a stranger's car, and that she actually enjoyed walking around Seattle, so her not getting a cab was actually pretty normal. Bandmates thought it could have been an ex-boyfriend. Mia had actually gone through a breakup shortly before her murder. They also theorized it could have been a deranged fan or even a complete stranger. Posters were placed all over Capitol Hill by Mia's friends, asking for help finding the killer. Investigators noted that drugs did not seem to be involved and focused their investigation on her circle of friends. They investigated her ex-boyfriend, a man named Robert. Mia had mentioned possibly wanting to see him that night. Robert states that he was out with his friends all night, which police were able to confirm. Investigators state that Robert cooperated fully, even going as far as taking a lie detector test. He was not their man. They continued looking into her friends and clearing them. Eventually, they ran out of people to look into, and they still had no suspect. 2 months before Mia's death, she wrote a song about being killed by a serial killer. She told bandmates she wanted to write about that just because it was happening so much. The song was called Sign of the Crab. The band would wind up completing and releasing their official second album in 1994, and Sign of the Crab would be the 13th and closing track on it. Mia's remaining bandmates joined with Joan Jett to release a charity album in 1995 and do a series of benefit concerts. They called themselves Evil Stig, which is Gits live backwards. And the opening track of that album, Sign of the Crab. Evil Stig and the Seattle music community, including Nirvana, Pearl Jam, and Soundgarden, raised around $70,000 through benefit shows and CD sales of both Evil Stig and another charity album called Home Alive, and used it to hire a private investigator named Lee Heron. Lee started from the beginning and re-interviewed everyone. She heard about a car that was seen leaving the area, but little more. Quote, "Most people thought that this was going to be an unsolved case forever. I thought that the only way it's going to be solved is if someone talks or if they get some DNA evidence," said the private investigator. Now, 2 investigations into the murder of Mia Zapata had completely stalled out. Months and years would begin to pass with no updates, no progress, and hope fading. In 1998, after 5 years of investigation, Seattle Police Detective Dale Tallman said, "We're no closer to solving the case than we were right after the murder." A new type of DNA testing called PCR had been discovered. It was able to extract DNA from much smaller samples by essentially copying or amplifying the small sample. The new method was finally being put into more widespread use. In 2001, the saliva sample was tested using this method, and 2 profiles were found. One matched Mia Zapata, but the other was an unknown male. When it was ran against CODIS, the criminal DNA database, there was no match found. It was entered into the system, so if a match would occur at a later time, the system would notify them. And that's precisely what happened. In 2003, the matching DNA hit came from Jesus Mezquia, who had recently been arrested in Florida for burglary and domestic violence. Mezquia was exiled from Cuba in 1980 due to being a felon and had a long history of violence and theft. His last known address was in Marathon, Florida. Seattle investigators flew out there and interviewed him. They showed him a lineup of 5 photos, including Mia, and told him they believe he killed one of the women in the pictures. He denied it. They then asked if he knew or spent any time with Mia Zapata. He said he didn't know her and had never spent any time with her. So how would his DNA then wind up on her body? They took another DNA sample from Mezquia, and of course, it was a match. They also learned that he lived in Seattle at the time of Mia's murder, only 3 blocks from where her body was found. 10 years after Mia was murdered, Jesus Mezquia was finally arrested and charged. Prosecutors told a story about Mia walking home, likely wearing her headphones and listening to music, as Mezquia pulls up in his car and abducts her. They believe he drove somewhere else and assaulted and killed her, then drove her to that street, pulled her out by the arms, and left her in that crucifix position she was found in purely on accident. No hidden meeting, no red herring. It was just pure chance. Mezquia pleaded not guilty, but did not testify in his own defense. The jury deliberated for 3 days, and finally Mezquia was found guilty. He was sentenced to 36 years due to the particularly painful injuries from the attack on Mia. One of the investigators even stated that if she wasn't strangled to death with that cord, she probably would have died from the injuries. Case cracked. People have honored Mia in many different ways. Numerous songs have been written about her. A documentary was made, a play, numerous television shows covered her story. But one of the most touching tributes that I learned about was an organization that was created called Home Alive. It ran for 17 years and provided women with self-defense classes that were affordable, even free if you couldn't pay for them. Home Alive taught not only physical self-defense, but as well verbal boundaries, like saying no when feeling uncomfortable, escape route techniques, and much others, including going to a therapist, writing in a journal, talking to friends, and exercising. The official nonprofit shut down in 2010. However, in 2012, several of the instructors from Home Alive put a website together covering the principles, history, curriculum, and links to many other resources. You can check it out at www.teachhomealive.org. I just wanted to end by reading you some of the lyrics from Sign of the Crab. Go ahead and take me out for all you think it's worth, because I know I'm the one that won't get hurt. Don't ruin me for what you cannot have. Sign of the Crab, written by Mia Zapata. Just a really terrible story, but there is this very uplifting ending to it in terms of seeing the legacy that was kind of started around this, the awareness that was raised to that area for women to not necessarily be more careful, but to empower themselves to handle situations like this, which is really kind of what Home Alive seems like it was about as well. And it's just, I don't know, it's really hard to look back at this. There's, footage you can watch, you can Google the Gits right now and see footage of them performing. And Mia was just such a strong front woman for the band. Her performances are really captivating. I'm kind of a fan of punk rock, and I think they kind of lean more to punk rock than even to grunge necessarily. And just the words that she wrote, particularly for that song, really, really resonate with me. She seems like she was just such a brilliant writer. And it's another one of those cases where it's a shame that the world loses out on being able to spend more time with Mia and to learn more about her point of view. It's really, really terrible. So let's continue on to the comment section. But before we do that, I have several people I have to thank that are new supporters on Patreon, starting with Ashley Stakowiak. Hey, Ashley, and thank you for the tweet about that too as well. I really, really appreciate that. Also, new patron Dane Parker. What's up, Dane? As well as Leslie and Davis. Hi, Leslie. Thank you all for your support. I really cannot do it without you guys, so I really appreciate having you there. Let me just make sure. Yep, that's all of them for this episode. So last week we talked about the case of Marcia Carter, a woman that was brutally murdered, and her sons had to wait over 30 years for justice. I was really hoping that I was going to be able to give you guys the update on the sentencing for Smothers at this point. It was supposed to happen on October 5th. I don't know if it might have been delayed for some reason, but there are still absolutely no articles about his sentencing being done. So I'm not sure what's going on with that. I would imagine maybe there's some kind of delay. You never know. It could be the courts that delay it. Could be something that his lawyer is trying to do, but there's literally no news updates on it since last week. But let's go ahead and continue with some comments from you guys, starting with the Sasselberger. She went to Berkeley and sang in a band and raised kids. How? Sounds like she was a brilliant woman. What a sad story. It makes me angry that the evidence sat on a shelf. No homicide should be anything less than priority. The killer was out and enjoying his life. Total injustice. Yeah, Sasselberger, first of all, you make a really good point, and several other people were making the same comment as you were. This sounds like an extremely hardworking woman to be able to put her life together in that way. And I totally agree with you. That is the injustice in this story, is that the information was there waiting to be processed. And, we know that for at least 6 years, this guy had freedoms that he shouldn't have been afforded. He should have been paying his debt to society. And unfortunately, we don't have that. Also, there was a lot of you talking about the comments that Travis made about forgiving Smothers. And I wanted to call out this comment in particular from Abra Singleton. Forgiving isn't the same as saying you don't want there to be consequences. I would definitely forgive, as I'm told to do so as a Christian, and because forgiving is for your own personal health, but I would still want someone who murdered a family member to be in prison for life. I admire the son. Thank you so much for sharing that, Abra. That really helped put some perspective to it for me personally, and I really appreciate that, because I was struggling. I'm still thinking about Alex Pacto and all this as well. I'm still struggling with my feelings about that. And I think you're right that there's a level of you forgive the humanity and what they've done, but you understand that because of the choices they've made, that they are going to be facing certain consequences. And that doesn't mean that you have to keep that anger in place and keep lashing out at them for what they have done. Really, really well said. And I really appreciate you taking the time to do that. And once again, I'm so impressed that Travis was able to put out his perspective like that. He shared it in several different media stories. I think it's a really important perspective for us outside of this looking in to understand that people that are essentially victims of this crime as well are able to come from such a powerful place. So I really appreciate you, Travis, if you happen to see this as well. Ms. Kruger, this is awful. DNA should be tested quick. If this man was a serial killer, how many people could he have killed in 6 years? Need more DNA testing facilities. Absolutely. And it almost feels like there needs to be some type of federal mandate on this. There shouldn't be any case that has to sit in this hold period for a matter of years because of something as simple as relatively simple as DNA testing. You're paying someone else for a service, or you're running it through your own labs to get this service. If those labs need to be beefed up, then we have to put more money towards that. It's just, it seems like it's that simple to me, but obviously I don't know the ins and outs of the particulars, but you make a really, really good point. I don't think that he was necessarily the serial killer type. Maybe if we talk about Alex Pactel, I think most of us can agree he's got the makeup of a serial killer. And Smothers, particularly with the fact that, he's now wheelchair bound, not that completely rules it out, but it also seems like he didn't have a history of it. We've heard of no other instances of him being violent in this exact same way. But to your point, we don't know that. It could have been the type of man that was a serial killer, and he could have gone on for another 6 years, and they could have been a lot more victims because of that. So I really appreciate you pointing that out. It's a really good point. Gail Addy, her sons need to sue him and his estate civilly. He has the money, and that would be justice. Take all his money, which he definitely valued more than life of this woman and life in general. I totally agree with you, Gail, and I am happy to hear that the sons are banding together and they're doing exactly what you're suggesting. There is a civil suit for wrongful death that's going on here, and considering that we have a criminal conviction, I'd be very surprised if they didn't get some type of good outcome with that case as well. I don't know how long it's going to take. I don't know if they'll try to settle it out because they know with a criminal conviction that they're probably going to lose that case as well. So his law team might be trying to make an offer to them to kind of settle that out of court. I wouldn't be surprised if they go that way about it. But you also make a good sign, or you raise a good point about what is important to him. And obviously life was not important. And even back then, before he had his large sum of money, it looks like he was trying to solve problems, paying other people to do the dirty work. So certainly it seems like he does value money above all. And finally, Jillian Gill. If someone is reading this who is a victim of domestic violence, or if you're living in fear of someone, no matter what your situation is, please reach out and ask for help. There are people who are professionally trained to help. You can ring your local helpline anonymously. Don't wait until it's too late. Reach out and get some help and protection. Things might seem really bad now. You might be at a very low point in your life where you can't imagine life getting any better, but life does get better. Sometimes you just need a helping hand. So reach out for help, ring your local helpline, speak to your doctor or a trusted friend, maybe even a trusted work colleague, explain your situation to that trusted person, and start taking your life back. I'm sending out love and strength to everyone. And Jillian, thank you so much for sharing that. And I wanted to include that because it is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And I thank you for taking the time to type all that up and put it in the comment thread. And as we have done in the past, I have made another donation to thehotline.org. And that is a place where you can go and get information if you are in a domestic violence situation. They also include several different ways to talk to people. They're also very smart. One of the first things that happens when you go to that website is it lets you know that, hey, what you're doing on this computer could be tracked. So it's already letting you know right off the bat that if you've got someone that's seriously abusing you, they could be tracking you as well. They might find out about this contact. I believe you can contact them through text or by phone. They have recommendations on how to do all that in a very safe way. And Jillian makes a good point about reaching out to people. If you're in a situation like that, it's really about putting a team together that's going to help you move out of that. You're going to need support if you're in that type of situation. So please look for those people. Please put that team together and do whatever it takes to get out of it. It's really, really important. We talk about so many cases here where things just don't go the right way, and things, despite how bad you might be in a situation now, things can be dramatically worse. If you're watching this channel, I hope that you at least understand that part of the message. Things can turn really, really rapidly in some of these cases. So please do get help. And once again, thank you to my amazing Patreon and PayPal supporters for enabling me to do things like this, giving regularly to thehotline.org. I just really appreciate being able to do that and help these other people that are doing such a good job helping others. Thank you so much, everyone. Hope you have a wonderful Monday. Thanks for spending some time with me. Please come back on Wednesday. We'll have a brand new Brain Scratch Searchlight for you right here on the Lord and Arch channel.